right, welcome in everybody to the Saints Insider postgame show for Week 18. It is finally over with a 27-19 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The New Orleans Saints season has come to an end. The Saints finish 5-12, and hey, they gave us an entertaining game today. Ultimately came up short. We saw some good things. We saw some bad things. It's been a bad season. The Saints did get a little bit of positive news from other games around the league in that early window. So we will talk about all of that today. I'm Zach Ewing, and we're going to be with you for the next 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to get visits from Jeff Duncan and Rod Walker, our Times-Picayune columnists, and we will get their reaction to that game. Also hoping to get visits from our beat writers, Luke Johnson and Matthew Paris. They are out at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. We'll see if they can get to it between visiting the locker room and all of that. But we're going to go through. We're going to show your comments and questions live on the screen. As always, just ask that you keep it clean, and we're going to show as many as we can. And we've actually got Rod Walker in the green room right now. So let's bring on Rod and get his reaction to that one. I know Rod's got some Pelicans duty to get to tonight, so we're going to get him out of the way and let him get on his way. So, Rod, another tough one for the Saints. They competed very well in this game. I think you have to give them credit for that. Give Darren Rizzi credit for that. Spencer Rattler showed some more promise at times. But what's your main takeaway today?
Yeah, I thought my main takeaway was that they did play well. I think, you look at our predictions for the week and you look at what Vegas thought about this game. You can't hear me?
No, I can hear you. I was just saying I had $28-20.
Oh, okay. I thought you were telling me you couldn't hear. Yeah. I mean, you look at what everybody thought. I mean, you thought this game was going to be a blowout. So, I mean, I think you have to give the Saints and give Rizzi and Spencer Rattler, give everybody some credit for just playing hard, because we all thought this was a game that they would just lay down. They had absolutely nothing to play for. And, they battled, especially that first half. I mean, I thought they played really well. So, credit to them for that. I mean, it doesn't, in the grand scheme, it doesn't mean anything. Of course, moral victories don't count in the NFL, but they do deserve a little credit, I think, for not getting blown out like pretty much everybody thought they would.
Yeah, I meant to say I had $28-20. I wasn't crazy enough to pick the Saints, but I did. I was just a point off for each team, so going to take credit for that one. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like, do you want to win the game? Of course, you always feel better after a win than a loss, but as season-ending games that are meaningless go, you kind of got everything you wanted. You had some young players show promise. You had the team show fight. And ultimately, you lost, and your draft spot, we talk about this, it bumps up one spot, has a possibility to bump up one more spot. Dirty Mermaid says, moral victories do count. Technically, we're 10-5. That's not the way this goes. But the Saints did show some fight today. Look, that could have been ugly. They could have rolled over. We kind of saw them do that in Green Bay. Now, that was a different situation. And we saw them do that a bit in the second half against the Raiders last week. And so it was good to see them come out. What about Spencer Rattler, Rod? Again, great first half. And then again, kind of fizzles in the second half. He missed some throws badly that could have changed this game. His numbers are pretty good overall, 26 of 42, 240 yards and a touchdown. But again, just a couple of plays short of leading the team to a win. Yeah,
in the second half, I think I counted up, he was 5 of 14 for 59 yards. So not nearly as good as that first half when he was 21 of 28 for 181 yards, a touchdown. Could have possibly been another touchdown, but they didn't give MVS a touchdown on that one. And I actually thought it was not a touchdown too. But I thought he played really well in the first half, and he showed some promise, and that's kind of what you want to see him, take these steps. You just kind of wish he could have carried it over to the second half, because at no point this season was he able to put an entire 4 quarters together. That's kind of what you wanted to see, and that's what they were going to need to beat this Bucs team. And I think the Bucs played pretty flat. I think they came to this game kind of thinking they were going to roll over them, and I don't think they were nearly as sharp as they've been, especially through the latter part of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Baker Mayfield had less than 100 yards passing into the fourth quarter. Now, you got to give him some credit. He made some tough plays with his feet, and he made the plays when he had to at the end. But this was a game the Saints easily could have won. So I want to let you know this season's post-game coverage is brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Now at East Jefferson General Hospital, Tulane Doctors are bringing academic medicine to more patients in new communities. Look for the shield to know the future of medicine is here. Call 504-988-5000 to schedule with any Tulane doctor or visit TulaneDoctors.com. And with that, we're also going to bring on our other Times-Picayune NOLA.com columnist. That's Jeff Duncan. Got a little three-way discussion going on here. Jeff, welcome in. Tell me what you thought of this one, because ultimately I think you can take some positives away from this for what it was for the Saints.
Yeah, I thought Rod said it best. I mean, looked like Tampa Bay came out flat, thought that the Saints would roll over. The Saints didn't. And then kind of must have been a Newt Rockne halftime speech from Todd Bowles at halftime or somebody, because you could tell the intensity of their defense was ratcheted up. I mean, the thing that stood out to me was Tampa, in the signs you see when a team's not ready to play, really poor tackling, just not running to the ball, all the, what do you call it, pre-snap penalties. They just looked like a team that was looking beyond the Saints. And we're really kind of fortunate, I think, to win the game today. They had some things go their way late. And credit, like you said, credit to the Saints for not rolling over. And that's one thing I guess they can go into this offseason with, is they didn't lay down.
Yeah, and there's going to be lots of talk about the offseason, which really begins right now for the Saints. And I don't know how much, as one of our commenters said earlier, how much one more moral victory gets you in that discussion. But, I do think you've got some players in that locker room who may have been showing they do want to stick around for whatever rebuild or reset this franchise is in for. So you take away some positives from that. Ultimately, though, guys, the Tampa Bay Bucs have won the NFC South 4 years in a row now. And this has been, Rod, like just kind of a comedy of errors of a division, really for 3 of those 4 years, if not all 4 of them. But you got to give Todd Bowles and the Bucs a lot of credit for finding a way every year to win the games they need to win at the end. They do it again today. They actually would have won the division with a loss because Carolina beats Atlanta in overtime. But they did get the win. They got Mike Evans his 1,000-yard season at the end, which was kind of crazy. I mean, if that ball gets like popped up in the air and returned for a touchdown or something, like it's going to be talked about for a long, long time. But they kind of got everything they wanted out of this. Yeah,
this is a Tampa Bay team that we've kind of written off like every 3 years. For the past 3 years, we keep saying, yeah, they're going to fall off now, and they just, they've kind of kept things rolling, and you just look at that entire division, man. I think everybody's probably trending in the right direction except the Saints. I mean, when you look at the quarterback play, Michael Penix looks pretty sharp today. Bryce Young is really taking some strides. So I think that's it should be concerning if you're a Saints fan when you look at that division and just how good everybody else is doing and how the Saints are going the opposite way. And I was looking at just some numbers here from the Saints have won 14 games over this season and last season. They've only beat one playoff team, and that's the Bucs last year. So even the teams they're beating aren't very good. So this is going to be a really important offseason for this franchise.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And as we mentioned, it kind of starts right now. The coaching search is next. Don't expect news quickly on that. I guess I'll open that discussion with this, Jeff. Darren Rizzi, we think he'll get an interview. Do you think he will be seriously considered for this job?
Yeah, look, I think he will. I don't think they're going to just do a token interview, but a lot's going to be dependent upon who else they interview. We know they have to go through the process that the NFL stipulates. So I think this will be a long, kind of extended search. That's the way the offensive coordinator search was last year. And like Rod said, I mean, I think this is a critical offseason for the Saints. They can't miss on this head coach. They've got to get it right after the Dennis Allen debacle. The fan base is more frustrated than I've ever seen them. And, looking around the division, as Rod said, I mean, the Saints look like they're in the worst shape for the future compared to their peers and their rivals. I mean, there's no one I think you'd rather trade places with right now. I mean, you'd rather trade places with everybody than the Saints because of their cap situation, their uncertain quarterback situation. So they've got to get a strong leader in there, someone that knows what they're walking into. And I think that's going to take them a little while, even with the head start they had, to find that person.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Rod, I'll let you comment on that too. I mean, we've heard Aaron Glenn's name mentioned a lot. We've heard Mike McCarthy's name mentioned a little bit. Of course, the Cowboy season is over now. His contract expires, I think it's like next Wednesday or something. And so he could start interviewing with teams this week. To to me, you've got to do a wide open, comprehensive search here.
Yeah, I think they need to. I guess, and we've talked about this over and over again. You just don't know how this front office will be as far as bringing in a quote unquote outsider. Are they willing to do that, or are they going to try to keep it inside with somebody they're very familiar with, which, this front office is kind of known for doing that. I mean, that's how Dennis Allen got the job. So to me, that's going to be the biggest question. Like, is this team really ready to start over and bring somebody in and, get a fresh start, or are they going to try to continue with somebody that they know, that somebody who's been in the building before?
Yeah, that's a discussion that will be going on really probably for the next month and maybe even into Super Bowl week in New Orleans. So one more kind of housekeeping note from today's game, actually a couple of them. I mentioned this earlier. The Saints have bumped up one spot in the draft order by virtue of their loss and the Chicago Bears win in Green Bay. They are now the number 9 spot in the draft, and they still have the potential to move up one more spot, and that's if the Las Vegas Raiders beat the Chargers in a game that's just started half an hour ago. So they will either pick 8th or 9th, depending on that Raiders game. And then the other thing is, Jeff, as you mentioned, you wrote a story about this, but because the Panthers win in overtime, the Saints officially finish in last place in the NFC South, which sounds like kind of a bad, embarrassing thing. But what it means tangibly is that next year you play a last place schedule. And so the 3 divisions where the Saints will just play one team out of them, they now play the last place team. So they get the Giants, they get the Bears, and they get the Titans. Whereas had they finished 3rd, you're getting the Jaguars with Trevor Lawrence, you're getting the Cowboys, and you're getting the Green Bay Packers again.
Yeah, I think it's a big difference. I know every year we look at the schedule and it's always changes, right? We all thought the Commanders was going to be an easy game this year, and it didn't turn out that way. But I think there is a difference in that 4th place schedule. Only 3 teams on the schedule right now that qualified for the playoffs this year, and one of those being the Bucs. So that's the first time the Saints have finished last in the division since 2008, and only the 3rd time they've done it since 2000. So, not a lot of rosy prospects. I mean, I think when we all predicted the season before the year, when we did the survey, I think all of us saw that it could go this way, but it was even worse. None of us, and I went back and looked at the predictions, none of us predicted it would end as poorly as it did with a 5-12 record.
You were close, Jeff. You had 6-11 though.
Yeah, I know, but even then I felt like I was stretching, right? And 5-12, really kind of staggering how poorly the season ended up. The fact that they ended up tied for last. Remember when Dennis Allen got fired, losing to the Panthers? And Rod, you made a good point there. I mean, the Panthers, the way they finished the season, if you're a Panthers fan, you've got to feel really good about things. And even the Falcons, I think, everybody knows what they've got to do. They've got to fix their defense. I mean, their defense is awful. They gave up 44 points today at home in a game they needed to win. So they've got to overhaul their defense. But I think with Michael Penix and that offense, you've got to feel good about where they're going. And then the Bucs just keep winning. And I think at some point, the Bucs are a good test case for fans. Maybe not the way you want to look at it, but if you just think about it, guys, both the Saints and Bucs had a Hall of Fame quarterback a few years ago. Both of them put a lot of resources into going all in to win Super Bowls. The Bucs have navigated the post-Brady career so much better than the Saints have the post-Breeze career. And so, I mean, they've done a good job of not only winning the division, I mean, staying competitive, but winning the division while getting their salary cap back in order and getting a lot of young players. They put in a lot of draft picks. So what they've done, the Saints just pale in comparison to them. And I think there needs to be some questions answered on Airline Drive why they have not been able to answer the bell as well as Tampa has, moving on from a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Jeff, got a comment here. I hope I'm pronouncing this right, but from Emil DeBeck asking if you think fans are more frustrated than the Aints bag on head days. Is it that bad?
Well, I wasn't around then. That was in the early 80s. I know it's crazy. I was alive, but I was not even in New Orleans then. I tell you, it's about as frustrated as it's been since I've been here. And I think part of it, the Saints are to blame for that, guys. I don't think fans in New Orleans or unreasonable at all. As a matter of fact, I think they've been very patient. I think they're very loyal. I think the Saints have brought a lot of this on themselves because of a little bit of institutional arrogance, in my opinion. They've acted like they're much better than they are. There's a little bit of a delusional, problem with people in the organization. And we saw it last year when Mickey Loomis had his press conference after the season and brought up all these Hall of Fame coaches. That attitude kind of permeates the building, in my opinion, and has caused, I think, the fans to feel disconnected to the team because they've been so upset, and they can see what's going on the field, I think sometimes better than some of the people in the front office.
And I think for fans now, I mean, they've tasted some real success. Those teams back in the 80s, they had just never even tasted success, so they were just like desperate for a team to be good. These younger fans now, they've seen the Saints be good, and we're in that age now where everybody's kind of like, okay, let's fix this right away, and quick fixes, and social media just kind of makes it, that kind of adds to it. So probably a little bit more frustrated now, I think, just because the expectations are a little different than they were back in the 80s.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Rod. And I think even for us, right, as journalists, we now know what it looks like, right? We know what success looks like. We know what good teams look like. We're not fooled by, kind of mirages. We understand what it takes and what it looks like. And I think the fans definitely are there. And they know what they've been seeing isn't it. And so when you continue to get the same message out of Airline Drive, I think that's added to the frustration, put it that way.
And this bad division probably hadn't helped. I think that's kind of, every year the Saints are, well, not this year, but in the past they've been, a game off of making the playoffs. But I mean, you look at the top teams in the NFC, when you look at the Lions, the Eagles, Vikings, Packers, the Saints are like so far away from where those teams are. They got a long way to go to catch up with those teams.
Yeah, I thought about that today. So, they were talking about how the Packers, right? The Packers are a really good team, but their losses this year have come all to the upper tier in the NFC. I think they've lost to the Vikings, the Lions, and the Eagles, and they haven't been able to compete with that tier. Yet when the Packers play the Saints on Monday Night Football, they beat them 34-0. So that just kind of gives you a real reality check of where this franchise is at. They can't even compete with the lower tier playoff teams, much less the upper tier. And I know everyone will say the Eagles, you played the Eagles tough earlier. But I heard Tom Brady say something today that I thought was really, spot on. And that is, you can't take – and this is what I fear the Saints might do this offseason. If I'm a Saints fan, I'd be really worried about this, is getting, diluted by those first 2 weeks. By getting caught up and saying, hey, we were good those first 2 weeks. Brady said you never take into account the first couple of weeks of the season, because teams are just trying to find themselves, identify roles. They're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work. And he brought up the Raiders beating the Ravens, the Patriots beating the Bengals in week 1. And that's a really good point. I mean, you can't – what the Saints are is much closer to what we saw them finish the season than what we saw in those first 2 weeks. And if people in the Saints operation are getting caught up in those first 2 weeks, I think that's a huge mistake.
Yeah, it's a tough time. There's a great discussion there, and the Saints. You went 5-12. I know injuries were a part of that. I don't see how you can look at this roster and not think that a major rehaul or overhaul is necessary, at least over the next couple of years. I mean, we'll see what they choose to do with the salary cap next year. Central to that discussion, I think, will be Spencer Rattler. Like, there's been some chatter out there that the Saints could cut Derek Carr. They would save a little bit of money against the cap. Most of his money would be a dead hit anyway. Most of your savings would come in 2026 if you did that, but you could start to reset things. Jeff, I think Rod answered this early on, but if you do that, you're committing 2025. I would think to Rattler. I mean, you could try to pick a quarterback in the draft or trade up. I personally am not enamored with this crop of draft quarterbacks, and I think Rattler has shown enough to where if you decided to go that route, you would probably hand him the reins for 2025 and see what happened.
Well, I think that would all be up. That's all going to be up to the next head coach, I would think, collaboratively with the front office. So I think it's really early to speculate on that. I think Derek Carr, certainly just the numbers alone show you that he gives you the best chance to win right now. I mean, they didn't win a game without him this year, and it was pretty ugly most of the time. So I would say, yes, they could still move on from Carr, but if they did do that, I would be surprised if they wouldn't go out and get a veteran at a cheap discount rate, maybe a 1-year rental rate. I mentioned in my crystal ball column Daniel Jones, somebody like that would come pretty cheap, looking to kind of, rehabilitate their resume and their image, much the way Baker Mayfield has done. We've seen Sam Darnold do it. I could see something like that happening here, or at least coming in to compete with Rattler. I don't think they would just hand it over to him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Rod.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's a good point, and the other possibility out there is you trade for a young quarterback who's not getting a lot of playing time, like J.J. McCarthy would be the most obvious example of that. If the Vikings continue to go with Sam Darnold, then that makes McCarthy available. I think that would cost you a pretty penny. You do have a lot of draft capital if you choose to go that way, if you really like J.J. McCarthy. But it's wide open, and after head coach, and as you said, Jeff, maybe the decisions are connected. The new head coach is certainly going to get a say in this. But the next question you have to answer this offseason is who's going to play quarterback in 2025?
Yeah, look, I think I think you're much better off sticking with Carr after what you did last offseason. To me, the Carr decision was made last offseason. Once you committed to restructuring his deal, you're kind of stuck with him next year. That's a big bite out of the apple in the salary cap to take. So I say you stick with him. I think it's pretty clear Spencer Rattler's not ready for prime time. So I would be surprised if they did cut Carr. I think they would have to bring in a veteran. There'll be a lot of guys around the league like that that'll be available.
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. I think you probably run it back, again with Carr. You mentioned the injuries earlier, and I think one of my concerns is the injuries weren't on the defensive side of the ball, and the defense was bad. And so, I mean, you can always just say, the injuries, but that's just the offense, which obviously struggled. But, I mean, they got some issues on the other side of the ball that they have to fix as well.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting, the graphic they showed during the game, I'm sure you saw that, where it said they've had 54 starter games out on offense. And that was only third in the NFL. So that means there's two other teams that have had more, than the Saints. So it's always good to have perspective on those kind of things. And the defense really wasn't missing hardly anybody. So, I think Pete Werner didn't play today. Obviously, Adebo is out. They traded Lattimore. But the front seven, and I actually thought they played pretty well today. They kind of got after the run game a little bit. We're getting pressure on Baker Mayfield. But part of that was also a little bit of maybe Tampa Bay playing flat up front.
Yeah, absolutely. Just looking at some of the comments from the locker room that are coming out right now over social media, Cam Jordan said he'll always look at the what if of this season, particularly with the health of the team. This is from Catherine Terrell of ESPN. Said he's been blessed to play 14 years in New Orleans, doesn't know what will happen next. There's some other decisions to be made here, Rod. Like, you got some veteran players who are approaching the end of their career. We don't know if it's the end of their career, and that's a decision the Saints will have to make on Cam, on Tyrann Mathieu. I don't think anyone thinks Demario Davis is done. He still seems like he's got the juice, but there are some aging players, particularly on this defense, that you kind of have to make decisions on too.
Yeah, and that's going to be a tough decision, because this is a front office that I think they kind of like to be loyal to guys. They kind of want to keep this is a family, and they want to guys like Cam. I mean, so I don't know what they're going to do with those guys. That's going to be a tough decision. But if this team is really serious about, moving forward, they're going to have to, make those tough calls.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll take a break here in a few minutes and let these guys get going. I know they have other things to do. But just some final thoughts, either whether it's on this game, Jeff, or as we begin this pivotal offseason, where is your head at as far as the Saints?
Well, really interested just to see, obviously, the head coaching change, what direction that goes, but also what other changes are going to be in store. I think I've written it a few times. I think it can't just stop at the head coach or the coaching staff. I think this roster is going to need a major overhaul. It's got to get younger, more athletic. And I think they need some changes in the building as well. I think you need to take a good hard look at the medical and training staff after the injuries that have kind of beset this team this year. I think that's something to take a hard look at. I just think everything needs to be looked at, and that needs to come from the top down because, I found over time, if you just look at the big picture of this team, since Breeze and Peyton have not been here, they've been a 500 or less organization. And that's the way I would look at it if I were Gail Benson and upper management. What do we need to do to try and compete and get back to that level that they were at when Breeze and Peyton were here? Those guys are generational leaders. I get it. But the common denominator is when they were here, they were a playoff competitive team. When they're not here, they're not. And so I think that leads me to believe that more changes are going to be coming one way or the other beyond the head coach.
Yeah, for me, I would say, obviously coach is going to be the big thing, but the roster just has to get better. We talked about it this week. They didn't have anybody who made the Pro Bowl. They didn't really have anybody we thought should make the Pro Bowl. You may make an argument for JT Gray or somebody maybe, but so that just tells you how far away this team is. They're the only team in the NFC without a Pro Bowler, one of just 4 teams in the league without one. So, when it's all said and done, it doesn't matter who your coach is. Your roster has to be – you got to have good players too. You're not going to out-coach some other team and be very good. You got to have some talent too. So they need to upgrade in the talent and realize that some of these guys are getting older.
All right, so the Saints lose their finale today, 27-19 at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, finish the season 5-12. You're watching the Saints Insider postgame show. It's brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Appreciate it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called Saints on NOLA.com. Appreciate you doing that. And we are going to take a quick break, say goodbye to Jeff and Rod. I know they've got writing to do and other duties to get to. So thanks, guys. And we'll be back right after this.
At Tulane Doctors, we know your health can't wait.
So we made booking appointments easier than ever.
Just dial 988-5000 to book with any physician, any specialty.
Whether at East Jefferson General Hospital or one of our other locations.
Because your health is our top priority.
And because navigating healthcare should be simple,
personal,
accessible.
When you see the shield, you'll know the future of medicine is here.
There's no better place to parlay than Caesars Sportsbook. Parlay Builder gives you all the game day action from all across the league. Multiple games, legs, and props, all in one spot. It's so quick and easy, you can keep your focus on the games and your nachos. Or if you're focusing on one game, remember, you can place your same game parlays live during the action. Caesars Sportsbook, the only sportsbook app with Caesars rewards.
Welcome back to the Saints Insider postgame show. Zach Ewing here with you. Appreciate everybody hanging out about 30 minutes into this show. Our thanks to Rod Walker and Jeff Duncan for stopping by and giving us their thoughts before they had to go. Jeff had to go write his postgame column, which you can find on NOLA.com/Saints. Rod is on Pelicans duty tonight. So that is another franchise that's in dire straits, but they play here in about an hour in Washington. So he is going to go follow that game. Look, there's a lot to talk about here. Luke Johnson, Matthew Paris, hopefully will be able to join us from Tampa here in the next 15 or 20 minutes or so. We're going to kind of go through the game, go through some thoughts on the game. You can continue to show your comments and questions. We will get to them live as they come in. And in the meantime, a quick scoreboard check of the 325 games. These games are all early second quarter. And the big one is, we talked about Sean Payton. Jeff mentioned him a couple of minutes ago. Sean Payton's Denver Broncos are cruising into the final playoff spot in the AFC. They lead the Kansas City Chiefs 14-0 and have the ball in Kansas City territory, 12 minutes left before halftime. So it looks like the Broncos are cruising into that playoff spot. Should they stumble, the team that would hope to take advantage would be the Miami Dolphins. They're leading the New York Jets 6-0. That game also early in the second quarter. So the Dolphins need a win and a Broncos loss, which does not look likely at this point. The other game of note, especially for Saints fans, Chargers and Raiders are tied 3-3 early second quarter, and the Raiders actually have the ball inside the LA 30. In fact, it looks like they just scored a touchdown to take a 9-3 lead pending the extra point there in Las Vegas. And again, that game is actually important for playoff seeding. The Chargers need to win to grab the 5 seed in the AFC, which would allow them to face the Houston Texans instead of the Baltimore Ravens in the first round of the playoffs next weekend. But it also means something to the Saints. If the Raiders were to win that game, the Saints move up to 8th in the draft order. Right now, they're at 9th. Maybe not a huge deal, but you never know when, let's say that Mason Graham, the terrific Michigan defensive tackle at a position of need for the Saints, is still available. Maybe you'd rather pick 8th than 9th. It also allows you just a little more leverage in trade talks if J.J. McCarthy does become a consideration, or they want to try to trade up for Mason Graham or another player in the top 5. Having number 8 instead of number 9 helps you just that little bit more. So keeping an eye on that. The other 2 afternoon games, and that is a touchdown in the Raiders game, is now 10-3 Vegas there. The other 2 afternoon games have no bearing on the playoff picture. 49ers Cardinals are 3-3. And then actually this one does. Seahawks are beating the Rams 7-3. And if the Rams lose that game, they fall to the number 4 seed in the NFC and would have to face the loser of tonight's Lions-Vikings game. And that would put the Bucs in the 3 seed, and the Bucs would avoid that game, against a 14-3 team, whoever it is who loses tonight in the first round. Instead, the Bucs would get the Washington Commanders, I believe, in the wild card round, and then obviously a better chance for a home game if there are some upsets later on in the playoffs. So that's a big result for the Bucs too. As it pertains to the Saints, 27-19, the final score today. Look, Saints showed a lot of fight. Let's go through the way this one turned out, and it just, I mean, it's just as frustrating as it can get in a lot of ways for the Saints. If you were rooting for the win, Spencer Rattler played a great first half. Rod mentioned his numbers. I think he was 21 of 28 for 181 yards and a touchdown in the first half. Could have had another touchdown. Real close play to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. It was ruled incomplete. Really kind of a 50-50 call. Darren Rizzi didn't challenge it, which I think was smart because I don't think there was enough evidence to overturn that call. You could certainly make the argument that it should have been called a touchdown, but once it wasn't, I don't think you're getting that overturned. So probably a good call there, and that forced the Saints to settle for a field goal. That broke a 3-3 tie. That made it 6-3 Saints. That was, I think, the second play of the second quarter was that Blake Grupe field goal, 39-yarder. He had hit a 35-yarder in the first quarter, and then the Bucs had answered on a 52-yard field goal from Chase McLaughlin, and that was a frustrating sequence too. The Bucs had 4th and long and were going to punt, but the Saints ran into the punter, gave him 5 yards. Bucs decided they were now close enough to try the McLaughlin field goal, and he made it from 52 to tie the game. Mentioned the overturn, or not the overturn, but the close call. MVS does not get the touchdown. Grupe's second field goal makes it 6-3 Saints. They did get the ball back and go right down the field and score 5-yard touchdown pass from Rattler to Dante Pettis, open in the corner of the end zone. Saints suddenly had a 13-3 lead, really had the Bucs on their heels, had the crowd stunned, all of those things. Pretty incredible. Bucs went down, and it looked like they were going to try to get themselves a touchdown before the half, but the Saints defense played pretty well all day. They stiffen in the red zone, force another McLaughlin field goal. It's 13-6. And on top of that, Rattler with really, I thought one of the highlights of his day was a great 1-minute drive. It was 56 seconds. He only had one timeout, and he leads the Saints all the way down. Actually had a couple of shots at the end zone, chance to score a touchdown before half. They do get another Grupe field goal, another 39-yarder. made it 16-6 Saints at halftime. Unfortunately for New Orleans, it was another story in the second half. Bucs get the opening kickoff, go straight down the field, score on a 6-yard touchdown pass from Baker Mayfield to Payne Durham. That made it 16-13. Bucs got the ball back. Saints offense really didn't do much at all in the second half. They go 3 and out. Bucs get the ball back, and then it was here that the Saints did force their one turnover. Carl Granderson, I believe, tipped a Baker Mayfield pass, which fluttered in the middle of the field. Jordan Howden gets the interception, and even though the Saints offense could not get a first down from there, they were close enough for another groupie field goal, this one 49-yarder, and with about 21 minutes left in the game, the Saints had a 19-13 lead. Stayed that way for a little while. Teams go back and forth. The Saints did have, really, I thought, a key, a special teams mistake from the Bucs again, a 14-yard punt from their punter, Jack Browning. He dropped the snap, picked it back up. He was rushed. He kicked it off the side of his foot, only goes 14 yards. Saints, it was basically like a turnover. Saints get the ball at the Bucs 47, but the offense goes backward. Foster Moreau, a bad penalty. Rattler got sacked. They ended up having to punt that ball back. And eventually the Bucs took the lead in a crazy sequence early in the fourth quarter. Baker Mayfield on 4th down and 8 completes it, just a brilliantly thrown ball, probably his best throw of the day, to Jalen McMillan for, it was about a 35-yard gain down inside the 10 for 1st and goal. However, after the play, Jalen McMillan does one of these gun motions. He was trying to point for a first down. Referees ruled it a gun motion, 15-yard penalty. Really kind of an embarrassing display from the refs, as I said on Twitter and on our live blog. Just took them like 5 minutes to figure out what the correct ruling would be. And Dean Blandino, the Fox officiating experts, on the air saying, yes, this should be 1st and 10. This is the rule. This is how it's enforced. A 15-yard penalty in between downs, or in between series. It's still 1st and 10. It's not 1st and goal. Should be 1st and 10. It took the referees on the field way too long to figure this out. They finally got the call right, but then the Bucs went more backward with a holding call, and so they were back at the Saints 32, and then Mayfield finds Jalen McMillan again for a 32-yard touchdown pass for the lead with 10:09 to play, makes it 20-19 Bucs. Saints offense gets close to midfield and stalls out again, and then the Bucs went on this long, time-consuming drive that went all the way down to Bucky Irving's 11-yard. It was technically a run. It was a backward pitch from Mayfield. He runs it in for a touchdown to make it 27-19, which actually, to me, Irving should have gone down inside the 5, made the Saints use their timeouts, taken more time off the clock, and then if you score, you score. If you don't, the Saints have very little time and they're back at their own goal line in a 20-19 game. But he scored. He actually gave the Saints one more chance at it at 27-19, and Rattler did lead the Saints down to about the 30-yard line, and then the drive stalled from there, an incomplete pass on 4th down and 5, and the Bucs hang on. Mentioned that they gave Mike Evans that one more touchdown or one more catch to get him over 1,000 yards to tie Jerry Rice's record for consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, and the Bucs win it 27-19. John says, it seemed like we didn't want to win the way we played in that second half. I think the Saints wanted to win. I mean, I understand the draft order and everything. I mean, the draft order was only going to, they were locked into the number 10 spot unless you got wins from the Bears or Raiders, which the Bears won and the Raiders are winning. So that could actually happen. But those players are not thinking about it like that. That's not how they're thinking on this. They're out there trying to play. A lot of them are playing for their next contract, or for a contract extension, those sorts of things. Spencer Rattler certainly playing. I don't know what the future is with Derek Carr. I think the Saints hold on to him for one more year. I think he gives them the best chance to win next year. But if you move on, Spencer Rattler's playing to try to become the guy next year. And so I think the Saints are trying to win that game for sure. But the loss does help them in one other way. I mentioned this a couple of times, but with the loss and the Panthers' overtime win in Atlanta, the Saints finish in a tie with the Panthers, and they actually lose that tiebreaker, I think, on common opponents. The Saints and Panthers finished 1-1 head-to-head, same division record, 2-4, and also, so it goes to common opponents, and I believe the Panthers get the nod there, and they finish in third place over the Saints. So what that means is you can say it's embarrassing to finish in last place behind the Panthers, whatever. I mean, ultimately that doesn't matter. What matters is next year's schedule now, instead of playing the Jags with Trevor Lawrence, the Cowboys with Dak Prescott, and the Packers with Jordan Love, you're getting the Tennessee Titans with a rookie quarterback. The Titans, I think, picked second in the draft. If I have that right, I think they have the second pick in the draft. No, the Patriots won, so the Titans have the first pick in the draft. So you may be facing, we'll see what the Titans choose to do with that. You may be facing Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. We'll see when that game is in the season, but rookie quarterbacks, it's a tough transition. I mean, so you're getting a team with a rookie quarterback. In the Titans, you're getting the New York Giants, who will probably have a rookie quarterback, and they pick lower down. They pick, I'd have to look at the draft order. Let me see if I can pull it up. But they're probably another team with a rookie quarterback and a new coach. Giants right now have the number 3 pick. So it's Tennessee, Cleveland, Giants. And I think those 3 are locked in. Nobody else can get up to those 3. Right now, the Patriots drop them down to 4th. So they'll pick 4th. And Jacksonville's also in that range. I don't think that either of the 4 and 12 teams, if they lose, the Jets or Raiders could pass those teams. So I think it's locked in. Patriots 4, Jaguars 5, and Jets 6, I believe. Right now, the Panthers are in 8th, and the Saints are 9th. They can each move up a spot if the Las Vegas Raiders beat the Seattle Seahawks. Beat the LA Chargers, and the Chargers actually have the ball inside the Raiders 30, trailing 10-3 in that game. So that's the story right now with the draft order. Saints are at 9th. But again, and then you're facing the Chicago Bears, and they'll have second-year quarterback Caleb Williams. They'll have a new coach. That may not be an easy game, but it's probably easier than facing the Packers for the 3rd straight year. And I want to say that game would have been in Lambeau Field for the 3rd straight year. So you avoid that trip. Instead, the Saints will be going to Soldier Field in Chicago next year. And we can talk about this. The full schedule will come out in May. But I think the Saints have some cold weather trips next year. I think they have Chicago. I think they have Buffalo. I believe they're also going to be at Miami. And I'm not sure who the other road games are in the NFC East. I would have to go and look, but I think they're actually at Seattle as well in the NFC West. So some cold weather trips for the Saints outdoors next year, but plenty of time to talk about that today. We are taking you through Saints and Bucks. The Bucks win it 27-19. Some final stats in this one. As mentioned, Spencer Rattler finishes 26 of 42 for 240 yards and a touchdown. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was the Saints' leading rusher, 8 carries for 26 yards. Now, they split carries, but nobody had very good day running the ball. Jamal Williams had 8 carries for 15 yards, probably his last game as a Saint. And Jordan Mims had 2 carries for 12 yards. Spencer Rattler did have 1 run for 11 yards. On the receiving side, Juwan Johnson, good day for him, 6 catches, 80 yards. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, 3 catches, 33 yards. He would have had a good day had he been able to come up with that touchdown pass in the first half, but a tough one, couldn't quite come up with it. Foster Moreau, 4 catches, 31 yards. Cedric Wilson, 3 for 22. Dante Pettis, 2 for 16, and the touchdown. Jordan Mims, 3 catches, 13 yards. Edwards-Helaire, a catch for 14. Kevin Austin, a catch for 13. Dallin Holker, 2 for 11. And Jamal Williams, 1 for 7. So add it all up, and that is 10 different receivers with a catch. That all happened in the first half. DMG says, obviously hoping for better days, but the Saints will always be my team. Eric says he's a diehard and going to ride till I die, real fan. And look, that's how it is. And my son was out in the other room. He was hurting when the Saints lost. You want to win games. And it's frustrating when you don't. So we'll see what the Saints do. But we do have Matthew Paris live from Raymond James Stadium. And let's bring Matt in. Matt's adjusting his screen there, so bear with us just for a sec. But Matt, live from Tampa, Saints lose this one 27-19. Tell us what the Saints locker room was like.
Yeah, it was a little bummed out, as you can imagine. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, just at first you were muffled, but I think we got you now. Oh, you're muffled again now. I don't know if your hand's on the.
Let me. Here.
That's better.
One sec. Oh, it's better? Okay. My AirPods kind of suck, so.
Okay. Anyway, the Saints locker room.
Yeah. Sam Jordan talked at length very kind of bummed out after a game like this. He said it was indicative of their season, cost them, with the penalties.
Matt, we're having a little bit of trouble. Your audio is going in and out. So I think we may bring in Luke and see if you can join in just a second. Let's do that. Here's Luke Johnson. He's also live from Tampa Bay. Well, Matt figures out his audio issues, but Luke, Matt was saying Cam Jordan very bummed out. What was that Saints postgame like?
Well, Matt was actually in the locker room. I spent most of the time at the podium with Darren Rizzi and Spencer Rattler, Will Harris. But I caught the last bit of Cam, and yeah, very subdued for Cam Jordan. He's not often like that. I think the phrase he kept using is uncertain times for everybody, not just himself. Cam might be done here after 14 seasons here. He recognizes that, but it's everybody on the roster. It's a team that just went 5-12 this year, and everything's going to be evaluated, looked over, and see who merits coming back. Obviously, there's some guys who are on the rookie contracts. They're not going anywhere, but a lot of guys aren't. And they got a lot of stuff to figure out at the top levels of the organization down to the 53rd guy on the roster.
Yeah, 100%. Ask your opinion on Spencer Rattler. We just had a couple of comments coming in saying he played well in the first half. He has the ability to. I think that's right. I mean, he's shown the ability to move the offense and shown some promise. Obviously, not the consistency's not there yet, but I thought we saw some more promising things today.
Yeah, I thought the first half was probably the best we've seen him look all season long. He was 21-28 for 181 yards and a touchdown in the first half. No sacks, no turnovers. He looked really good. And really, he was 21-26 before he threw 2 balls to the end zone at the end of the half trying to get a score. So I think that has kind of been the case though for him throughout the year. Is he looks good for long stretches of games, sometimes an entire half, and then it goes away. The sort of negative type plays that he's trying to avoid, or at least trying to cut back on, really started cropping up in the second half. He took a pair of sacks. One he ran right into. He missed some open receivers. So it's still really up and down, but that's frankly just to be expected from a guy who they drafted in the 5th round, who really was playing with essentially the second team offense, and in some cases a third team. I mean, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not on this team like a month ago, and he was running back 1 today because Alvin Kamara and Kendra Miller were out. He didn't have Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed and Taysom Hill and Eric McCoy. This is not even counting the fact that Derek Carr missed 7 games this year. So I'd really like to see what he looks like with the full component of players. He's still clearly got some growth to do this offseason. I think that's to be expected out of any rookie quarterback, but he's got some areas to grow, but there's definitely some promise there. You can see the stuff that made him one of those guys that people were excited about this offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. On the defensive side of the ball, I thought the Saints played hard, Luke. I mean, they really frustrated Baker Mayfield and that Bucs offense, I'd say, for 3/4 of the game. And then Mayfield finds a way to make some plays as he has all year, and the Bucs win it. But really overall, just a good effort from the Saints. I think that we kind of questioned this week whether we would see that, especially if things went bad early. And so you have to give them some credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely played a lot better than I was expecting defensively today. But I think one of the things that Baker Mayfield excels at, and something we talked about on the podcast before the game even started, was he's a really elusive guy. He wormed his way out of 2 or 3 sacks today. He had a 28-yard scramble on 3rd and 14 on the drive that put them up by 8 points at the end of the game. And he made some big time throws on 3rd downs and 4th down. That 33-yarder he hit Jalen McMillan on 4th and 8, and that's the game right there. So I think he's a player who, when he's on, he's capable of it. He's, I think, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL when he's on. I think consistency is an issue for him. It's why he's not considered a top 5 quarterback, but he was really on in the second half, man. He really took the game over. But
absolutely,
to your point, I think they did a good job bottling that up in the first half. He had 61 yards rushing in the second half, but the first half I think he only had 7. one carry. So I think they did a pretty good job for half of that game. It just wasn't enough to win.
Couple of housekeeping notes. We've mentioned, Luke, the Saints are number 9 currently in the draft order, and the Raiders are winning 10-6 in Vegas against LA, so they could still move up to number 8. Also, the Saints get the last place schedule with Carolina's win, so a couple of positives to take into it. But, I mean, where I want to end is this coaching search starts now in earnest, and the Saints, this offseason is just one, and I feel like we've said this for a couple of years now, but really, this is the pivotal one for this franchise. They've got to make the right decisions in this offseason and get this thing turned around, or it's going to be a long haul.
Yeah, and even if they do make the right call, it still might be a long haul, right? They've got, as we've talked about for years, an aging roster with a really precarious salary cap situation. They're going to have to make some tough decisions this offseason. Even if they bring a guy like Derek Carr back, right, and decide not to pay him or not to account for $51 million of cap money for a guy who's not playing on your team. Like, even if they bring him back, they're going to have to make other moves to make that work financially. So, like, I just think that, unless they really nail the draft, like we saw the Rams do a couple years ago, where they had the kind of down season, really nailed the draft, and we're right back into being like a playoff contender. We're probably looking at a couple tough years here, even if they get the absolutely right person in to be the head coach of the organization. And because of that, I think it's probably going to hurt their chances to land some of the top coaches out there. If I'm Ben Johnson, I mean, I'm looking at the situation that you're facing, where you're not going to be able to draft a quarterback in this year's draft, probably. You're in a bad cap space. So you're going to have to get a couple years to dig out of that. Like, why would I want to do that versus some of the other more intriguing options out there? I think it could ultimately hurt them going into this coaching search, but we'll see. I mean, back when they hired Sean Payton in 2006, and I don't think he was viewed by any means as a slam dunk hire. It wasn't the big name on the coaching market, and yet, he's the most successful coach in franchise history. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame one day. So, they could nail it. They could turn it around quick if they get everything right, but they got to get everything right.
No doubt, and we will follow it every step of the way. It starts today. You can read Luke's work at NOLA.com/Saints. Thank you, Luke.
My pleasure.
And we will take Luke out and add in Matt Paris. Matt, hopefully got the audio figured out. It looks like you took the AirPods out.
I did, yeah. I think that was the thing.
So you were saying Cam Jordan just kind of emotional, downtrodden in the locker room. Describe what he was like.
He was. He didn't quite come. He didn't quite cry, but he was close. His eyes got a little red at a certain point. Described it as an air of uncertainty entering the Saints, not just for him, but a guy like Darren Rizzi, who's really kind of embraced coaching this team over the last 8 weeks. Around the Saints locker room, there are a lot of veterans on this team that could be released or depend. It really depends on kind of how the front office wants to go about this, and because they've kept the cards close to their vest, so to say, they're really kind of entering now a stretch where they don't know who's going to coach the team, what moves they're going to do. Will Derek Carr be back? Like, there's just a lot up in the air right now.
Yeah, and that last point is where I started with Luke. I'll start with you too. Spencer Rattler today, kind of the same song, played really well in the first half, just like he did against the Raiders, just like he did the first time against the Buccaneers. And then defense has made some adjustments. You could argue Clint Kubiak maybe should have made better adjustments on his end, but I also think Rattler just plain missed a lot of throws in that second half. Still kind of showing consistency as an issue for him, but also showing some growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think let's start with the growth first. I thought today really kind of catered to his strengths, not just, we saw a lot in the games earlier in the year that they were really reliant on these rollouts, really reliant on the running game. They didn't really have that today in the first half, and yet he still found ways to be productive with quick throws. Seemed like they spread it out, and he was still able to find guys in the middle of the field. But you did see it again change in the second half, and that's my concern with Spencer Rattler right now is I looked it up. He has his passer rating for the first half this season is above 100. I think it was 103.5, And then when I looked at it during the middle of the fourth quarter, so I'll look it up again here when I go to write, but it was at 45. And so it's just a huge split one way or another. He's taken at least 16 sacks in the second half compared to 6 in the first half. There's just a lot of situational stuff I think needs to improve with him, but he's been dealt a challenging hand just because of who he's had to play with.
Yeah. And otherwise today, it just kind of a surreal game in a lot of ways, that the Saints had a commanding lead in that you never expected. And I imagine the crowd there felt pretty stunned. And then in the end, the Bucs end up getting everything they wanted. They got the Mike Evans milestone. They got the division crown. And the Saints, I guess you could say the same thing. They didn't win the game, but I think everybody kind of left feeling at least a little bit of pride on their end. But describe kind of those swing of emotions in the second half.
Yeah, the way I described it when I was tweeting was stupid. I just thought this was a very dumb game, the way it was playing out. I couldn't believe Tampa went on 3rd and 1. They called a quarterback keeper, and Baker Mayfield lost 7 yards. And then there was that whole delay between the refs, whether it was first and goal with 24 or 1st and 10. It was just Tampa seemed determined to do everything to lose that game up until it didn't. But I think from the Bucs, you saw kind of a sense of relief, especially when Mike Evans got that 1,000-yard mark. Sharif pointed this out from WDSU, but I'm going to just steal it because it's a really good point. The Saints season last year ended with a controversial play with Jamal Williams going for that touchdown. And this season it ends with the Bucs kind of doing the same thing. Even though the game was wrapped up, they still went for the record that mattered to them. So you kind of see the opposite ends of the spectrum there, and that's kind of the way the season has gone for the Saints.
Yeah, and like the Falcons will be searching for a new coach last year, or were searching for a new coach last year. That's the Saints this year.
Yeah.
Chief Peanut, I remember you guys' prediction. Hey, I just want to point out one more time, I had $28-20. So I was pretty damn close. That might be the closest any of us have got all year. So I wonder what Chief Peanut's production was there. $28-20 and ends 27-19. So
I think I had 27. I just had the 7.
You had 27-7. Yeah. Okay. So forget this one. It's over. We're moving on into the offseason. Matt, the Saints will have a high draft pick, whether it'll be number 8 or number 9. We don't know. Depends on the Raiders game. They're also going to play a last place schedule next year, but pretty much everything else is in chaos. We don't know who the quarterback will be. We don't know a lot of questions about the roster, the veteran guys on it, and we don't know who that coach will be. So set the scene for us as we go into this coaching search.
Yeah, I'll write about this a little later this coming week, but this coaching search, for anyone who wants a fast, neat coaching search, I don't think this is going to be one of those. You know, the NFL changed its rules last year where you can't even meet with coaches in person until the divisional round. That's January 19th. So we're still at least a few weeks away. And then if you look at kind of the hot candidates around the league, like Aaron Glenn, Detroit's defensive coordinator, like if Detroit wins and goes to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to wait to meet him and that sort of stuff. So they could, depending on who they want, have to wait a little bit. But I would expect the NFL rules in place now make this a longer process. But then also knowing the Saints and factoring them in, you think about how long last year's offensive coordinator search took as well. I think they're going to be very thorough with this. They're going to talk to a lot of different types of candidates. And so, get ready to buckle in, I guess.
Yeah, that's well put. And just on that note, your final thoughts on today, on this season, and just kind of where everything went wrong for the Saints.
Yeah, I mean, it was, as Cam Jordan said, it was the type of game that they had played so often this season that they just kind of fell apart even when things had gone well for them. And does a new coach change that? Does a roster overhaul change that? There just needs to be a lot of self-evaluating it and see where this can improve, because as injured as the Saints were this season, I think to an extreme, some of the guys who got hurt have been injured in the past. And I just don't know how much you can count on this type of formula to be sustainable over the long haul.
Yeah, it's well put. And as Jeff said earlier, like the Saints are not the only team that had a lot of injuries. So you just don't get to use that as the ultimate excuse. So Matt, thanks for dropping by. We know you got to get writing. You can read his work on NOLA.com/Saints tonight and throughout this coaching search. Thanks, Matt. All right. We're right at the hour mark. So we are going to go ahead and call this a show, call it a season, call it a post-game show. This season's Saints post-game coverage was brought to you by Tulane Doctors. Now at East Jefferson General Hospital, Tulane Doctors are bringing academic medicine to more patients in new communities. Look for the shield to know the future of medicine is here. Call 504-988-5000 to schedule with any Tulane doctor or visit tulanedoctors.com. So our thanks to them. Our thanks mostly to you guys for hanging out all season long. I know it's been a rough ride. The Saints finished the year 5-12. But look, we're just getting started. Subscribe to the Saints on NOLA.com YouTube channel. We've got 2 shows just about every week. We might cut it down to 1 show every now and then, but certainly for these next few weeks, it's going to be 2 shows a week as we dig into the coaching search, where the Saints are looking, the rumors we're hearing, and what our opinions are about where they should go. And then after that, it's, okay, who are the offensive and defensive coordinators that get brought in? What are the free agency decisions? Then we get into the draft. And all of a sudden, before you know it, we're talking about next year's schedule and mini camp and moving into 2025 and putting this one behind us. Also, by the way, 35 days, we've got a Super Bowl here in New Orleans. So we'll be covering that as well, and got ourselves a spot on Radio Row. Going to try to talk to some Saints players, maybe some NFL stars as they walk by. So it should be a fun time that week with the Super Bowl here. Chief Peanut says, "Bye. We love you too, Chief Peanut, and we love all of our listeners on the Saints Insider, and we'll be back Wednesday with our next regular show. So check that out. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and we will see you next time. Again, appreciate all of you for hanging out. Final score one more time: Buccaneers 27, Saints 19. Bye, everybody.